Repeat back to me what I had just said.
Ketashok blinked. The ocean waves crashed all around the ship, spraying foam and droplets of water upon the deck. He had been focusing on the waves when the request pulled him back to the moment. So long had they been on the ship that he had grown accustomed to dozing off and listening to the sounds the ocean made, especially when he was being lectured from the senior members of the crew. Before he could respond, however, he felt a lance of pain shoot through his abdomen, causing him to double over. He looked up just in time to see and receive another hit from his commanding officer's gauntlet.
The more you make me repeat myself, the more welts and bruises you will accumulate across the length of this journey.
The Ketaston said evenly as he stood above the Ketashok.
Is that the type of story you wish to be known for? The first Ketashok within the Battlestar to die, before setting foot in foreign lands.
Ketashok knew that the Ketaston was not joking, but asking a serious question. He had only known the Ketaston for a few weeks, but that was enough time to glean that the man was about as dedicated to the Qun as they come, and that he made no threats, only spoke of what the Qun demanded.
No, Ketaston.
Ketashok wheezed out. He stood as quickly as he could before the inevitable third strike could be launched. Thankfully, the Ketaston was either satisfied with the speed Ketashok had recovered himself, or was possibly in a merciful mood, most likely the former.
Good. Now repeat back to me everything I had said prior to your disciplinary actions.
The Ketaston said.
You had said that,
Ketashok began, but realization quickly dawned that he genuinely had no idea what the Ketaston was saying before. Obviously something about the mission, but what specifically? He noticed just in time that he had taken too long pondering, and could already see the Ketaston shifting to deliver another blow. He thought quickly, and relied on his training, and remembered the teachings of the Qun. I humbly request that the Ketaston repeat the information in more detail. Ketashok spoke with as much discipline as he could muster. Too much panic in the voice would garner another beating. Too much forcefulness, however, would be seen as a sign of insubordination, and would lead to things far worse than a beating. Several moments passed by in silence as Ketashok stood at attention, resigned to his fate. Surprisingly though, it seemed that the gamble had paid off. The Ketaston sighed and nodded.
Very well, Ketashok. Listen closely.
The Ketaston began, his voice a low growl against the ocean's roar. His stern gaze locked upon the younger man, studying him in the same diligent manner he might study an unfamiliar map.
We are en route to Ravane. First stopping in Kantar, and then making our way to Darsmood. It is an imperative journey with multiple objectives.
He paused here, allowing the information to sink in before continuing.
First and foremost is establishing better relations with the people of the lands we will be traversing through. This will be paramount to the mission's survival. We are representatives of the Qun, and will demonstrate the folly of rejecting it.
Ketashok did not nod or react to the description of the mission given to them by the Ketashok. It was simple enough thus far, but something about the way the Ketaston said it made him feel uneasy.
Second,
The Ketaston said, his voice breaking through the doubt in Ketashok's mind.
we are to scout and make detailed reports of the lands we travel through, for any information that would be of interest to the rest of the Antam. Since the incidents with the former Areshok and Vidisala, it has become clear that our knowledge and understanding of the kingdoms here on the continent have been found wanting. Thus, every member of this delegation will keep a journal of all you experience throughout our travels. Third and final,
He continued, his voice steady against the rhythm of the ocean's song.
the delegation has been comprised of varied interests. Among them is the Hisrad, a representative of the Ben Hasrath. If they should require any assistance upon this journey, you and any other attending personnel shall aid them to the best of your abilities and beyond. That aside, you are never to address the Hisrad by station or even acknowledge their existence during the entire expedition, unless approached first to assist in whatever they need you to do.
The silence after the briefing was deafening, only broken up by the occasional crashes of the waves against the hull of the ship. It did not take long for Ketashok to realize that the Ketaston wanted him to repeat back to him the information that was just said. A repeat of before, but this time would be different. The primary objective is to establish better relations with the peoples of the mainland. Second, we are to catalog our experiences on the mainland for anything of interest to the Antap. Finally, we are to provide any assistance we can to the representatives of the Ben Hassaraf, while making sure to ignore their existence until our aid is requested. More moments passed by as Ketashok stood there, the deck once again descending into silence, with only the ocean outside to provide momentary relief. The Ketastan only nodded his approval.
Good. If you have any questions or concerns, you may voice them now.
The Ketastan said. Ketashok still stood at attention and wondered if this was a trap, a test of his discipline. He considered asking who they might meet in these foreign lands. Would they be greeted with hostility or open arms? He had heard rumors of Riveni pirates and Tevinter slavers. His mind wandered everywhere, thinking of many possibilities and questions to ask. But no, his curiosity could wait. He decided against indulging in his curious side for the time being, and thus said nothing. The Ketastan, still showing no signs of emotion, gave a curt nod, another sign of approval.
Good. Then if there are none, you will dismiss to your other duties until morning muster tomorrow.
Ketashok saluted the way he had been taught, and left on his heel to descend below into the bowels of the ship, where his daily chores awaited his return. He still could not shake the unease he had gained while listening to the details of their mission. It wasn't the weight of the mission itself that had troubled him. It was the thought of the Ben Hassaraf, shadows among their ranks. He had never liked secrets, and the idea of traveling beside one of them, unseen and unheard, made his skin crawl. But worrying would do no good now. All that was left was to do his work, and hope that the sea, and what lay beyond it, didn't swallow him whole in the coming weeks. Hello and welcome, esteemed peers and colleagues. Welcome to the beginning of our grand exploration into this vast and intricate world of ours known as Thedas. I shall be your guide and companion through this journey, one Aurelius Feroci, historian, scholar, and researcher within the University of Minrathis. The world that we inhabit is vast indeed, and, regardless of what some of my colleagues here in the university may say, is very much worth exploring and combing through, especially the parts that are not just Tevinter. Our journey through the history and reaches of Thedas will not solely be grounded in steady facts laid out in dusty tomes and scrolls, but will also feature speculation, conjecture, and most importantly, theory. We as scholars have a duty to piece together the fragments of riddles, puzzles, and hearsay to form the best picture we can to understand our respective fields. Therefore, no other field, in my scholarly opinion, is worthy of such extensive examination and scrutiny as my beloved field of history. Through this series of lectures and treatises, we will explore different aspects of Thedas, from the towering peaks of the frostbacks that separate Ferelden and Orlais, to the sun-drenched beaches of Parvalan. We will delve into the heart of the oldest cities and learn about civilizations that rose and fell before ours. Because, yes, even the mighty Imperium was not the first upon the face of Thedas, as we will eventually cover. And it is not just the physical aspects of the world that beckon us. The political landscape, rich with intrigue and subterfuge, is just as enthralling. These subjects will be handled a bit more carefully than other more mundane topics, however. The reason should be quite obvious, especially to those who travel this tenuous path with regular frequency, but I will illuminate those of you who are yet in the dark on this matter. In short, it is one thing to discuss events such as assassinations and coups and other such romantic tales of either more recent or of long ago, as the facts have been for the most part laid to rest. It is another thing entirely to discuss and speculate upon those same topics, since those that benefit from said topics being already settled would very much be, let us say, annoyed by the past being brought up again. Therefore, we will still discuss these delicate topics, but will be respectful and mindful to not push the conversation too far into inconvenient regions. Finally, after that bit of uncomfortable business has been addressed, we will be delving deeper into the history of the arcane and spiritual. I am not as versed in the Chant of Light as would be any good father or mother of the Chantry, so we will be leaning harder than normal on existing wisdom for those segments. Certainly will also be toning down the speculation regarding said subjects of faith. As with before, there can be many an inconvenient area of discussion one may wander into recklessly, that others will not look too favorably upon. On the opposite side of the coin, however, I am more than qualified and also eager to discuss the arcane aspects of the world and how the arcane was and is viewed today. This particular area will be most enlightening to readers who are unfamiliar with how magic is viewed outside of Tevinter. And well, let's say your experience with said knowledge will vary depending on whether you are a Soparati, a Leighton, or an Altus. In particular, those within the Magisterium would do well to pay attention during these segments, especially with recent events involving a particular group being so fresh in the minds of everyone inside and especially outside of Tevinter. Now then, I have rambled on with the introduction long enough, I think. Let us begin with the question that will be our first stepping stone into a vast ocean of knowledge. A question that, despite its simplicity, carries profound implications to us as denizens of this world. That being, what is Thedas? A pertinent question to perhaps start off with, and one that many of you no doubt consider too simple. There, however, lies the curious thing about thinking of things bigger than yourself. That is, that simple does not always mean easy to explain. I will do my best to describe in detail what is currently thought of as the answer to this seemingly benign query. Thedas, in the basis of terms, is the land we call that houses the many nations and kingdoms that we are familiar with, and that most if not all of you reside within. From the frigid Kokarian arbor wilds to the south, the Amaranthine Ocean to the east, the desolate Anderfels to the west, and finally the Tevinter Imperium to the north, all of these regions and everything in between is considered to be the land of Thedas. Even the islands of Saheran and Parvolan are considered to be part of Thedas, even while being separated by bodies of water. The underground cities of the dwarves also would be considered to be part of Thedas, but due to the obvious issue of darkspawn infesting large swaths of their former empire, it is hard to calculate how far that claim actually goes. Thedas, to our current understanding, is not the only large landmass, but is the only one we are familiar with at present. There are heated debates going throughout every establishment of higher learning about where the Qunari came from, the unexplored regions west of the Anderfels, and of other mysterious groups not native to our shores. We will be going into each of these particular topics at a later date, as their discussion very much deserves to have their own segment. On the note of other landmasses, however, many of you may have heard or even used the term Thedas as a catch-all phrase for the entire world. While I cannot blame my colleagues within Tevinter too harshly, as the term does originally come from Old Tevin itself, and quite literally translates to all lands outside, or more precisely, all lands outside of the Imperium, I nevertheless cannot condone such usage, as the common usage within Thedas is that the term refers to the entire landmass we inhabit, as mentioned earlier. To emphasize this point, as a reference from a reliable source that can honestly be found in most civilized parts of Thedas, I shall now quote part of the wonderful print of In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by one Brother Ferdinand Genetivi. To quote an excerpt, Thedas is bounded to the east by the Amaranthine Ocean, to the west by the Tirashan Forest and the Hunterhorn Mountains, to the south by the snowy wastes that lie beyond the Orkney Mountains, and to the north by Dunark Forest. The word Thedas is Tevinter in origin, originally used to refer to lands that bordered the Imperium. As the Imperium lost its stranglehold on conquered nations, more and more lands became Thedas, until finally people applied the name to the entire continent. The northern part of Thedas is divided amongst the Anderfels, the Tevinter Imperium, Antiva, and Ravane, with the islands held by the Qunari just off the coast. Central Thedas consists of the Free Marches, Navara, and Orlays, with Ferelden to the south. What lies beyond the snowy wastes is a mystery. The freezing temperatures and barren land have kept even the most intrepid cartographers at bay. Similarly, the western reaches of the Anderfels have never been fully explored, even by the Anders themselves. We do not know if the dry steppes are shadowed by mountains or if they extend all the way to a nameless sea. There must be other lands, continents or islands, perhaps across the Amaranthine or north of Parvalan, for the Qunari arrived in Thedas from somewhere, but beyond that deduction, we know nothing. End quote. Now, the name Genitivi should elicit a reaction of recognition among most of you, and most likely a reaction of distaste as well. I won't go into too much here, but I will say that while his earlier works do have a modicum of bias against Tevinter, they are nevertheless insightful and well written. I implore many of my countrymen to give his books detailing his travels a read, as they not only give insight into the regions across Thedas, but also give perspective of someone who is not from Tevinter. The latter being equally as valuable as the former, as I've observed a, let's say, willing ignorance among my peers here in Tevinter relating to how others view us. I may or may not touch upon this topic later on, but for now, I'll leave it at that. Moving on back to more academic matters, from this quick excerpt we can gain a clearer understanding of what makes up Thedas. There are many natural landmarks that dot and divide the continent, with the most defining being the mountain ranges and oceans/seas that surround the landmass itself. We will go over some of the more famous and defining features shortly as we delve into each region of Thedas individually. And at that, a last note before I begin. Let me remind you that the mention of each region here does not depict a full, comprehensive geographical and cultural study. Rather, it is just a brief enlightenment on what each region of Thedas uniquely presents. If I do not mention a certain feature or aspect of your homeland, please know that I do so that the region in question may get a full combing through as it properly deserves. As a scholar, I do not hold any bias, and will present the facts as plainly and simply as I can. Only afterwards will I speculate and make a mockery of local customs, so really, there's no need to worry. To begin our discussion of each region, we will go through them in top to bottom order, to maintain some consistency with the previous excerpt. Thus, we will begin with everyone's favorite barren wasteland, the Anderfels. Now, that intro may seem a bit harsh, but no, it really is mostly arid barren land in the Anderfels, as the inhabitants of the land, the Anders, are oh so quick to surprisingly brag about. Brag is a strong word that would imply a strong burst of emotion or some such, which for an Anders would most certainly be seen as a sign of illness. Alright, I'll stop. But everything I've said is barely with exaggeration. The Anderfels holds the dubious honor of being the site of multiple blights, and as a result is so devoid of life that it is said that bodies do not even decay in the open. The terrain is that of an arid badlands or open steppe, which seems to go on and on and on without end. Honestly, it is no wonder that this sort of environment has produced some of the hardiest and grim people in the known world. Add in the fact that the Darkspawn never really left and considered the Blight's ending as more of a mere suggestion, and you have the perfect remedy for both effective soldiers and stalwart allies. Now, To the south of the Anderfels lie the Hunterhorn Mountains, which comprises its southern border with Orlays. To the north are the Wandering Hills, which forms a barrier from the Donark Forest. To the west lies the Volse Sea and vast unexplored reaches of the Anderfels. And finally, to the east lies the Colian Sea and the Tevinter Imperium to the southeast. Ah, Tevinter. My own homeland, and I assume the homeland to a great many number of you as well. The Tevinter Imperium is by far the oldest nation still residing on the surface of Thedas, and over the centuries has very much earned the right to do so. I will not go into great detail about the history, as that very much deserves its own segment in the near future, as well with the other regions. However, to briefly touch upon the people who inhabit the land of Tevinter, we are a very industrious people, proud of our heritage, even if it is to a fault sometimes. Besides that, Tevinter is set apart from the rest of Thedas by the sole fact that, within its borders, the use of magic is not only permitted, but encouraged. Before I make this a Tevinter segment though, let us move on to the geographic locations of interest, shall we? Now, there are a few areas of note in Tevinter, with the Valerian Fields and Silent Plains coming to mind immediately. Vast stretches of land integral to the history of Tevinter and, dare I say, all of Thedas. Much of Tevinter is moderately warm and temperate, allowing for easy agriculture and rolling plains in many parts of the nation. A sharp contrast to the climate of the Anderfels to the west. The coastline also boasts pleasant living conditions, as the warm water of the Nosian Sea to the north provides mild summers and winters. Really, the true exceptions of fertility in Tevinter are those areas such as the Silent Plains where past blights have come and gone. These areas, much like any area a blight traverses through, are barren and lifeless for the most part. To the south of Tevinter lies the Kingdom of Davara, and the confederation of city-states known as the Free Marches, along with a small border with the Empire of Orlais. To the east, the border with Antiva is separated mostly by the hauntingly beautiful Arlathan Forest. Finally, to the north is the aforementioned Nosian Sea, and also the large Isle of Sahedon, which is such a touchy subject that I will push said subject down the proverbial pipeline for another day. Moving on. That old business aside, the next region we will discuss will be the Principality of Antiva in the northeastern part of Thedas. Antiva shares many of the features of Tevinter, in that it is a very temperate region, albeit a bit more humid. Many settlements in Antiva are located on the coast, so the culture has taken on a more maritime aspect. This has led to a boon in the mercantile sector, where Antiva merchants and trading convoys are known all across Thedas. Mind you, this is not always a good thing, as the Antivan merchant is one of the best at acquiring good deals and wares, which makes them tempting targets for pirates, bandits, disgruntled customers who were lied to about the quality of some seemingly nice boots, competitors, etc. Some defining aspects of the geography in Antiva would be the famous White Spire Mountain, located in the northern part of the country. Rialto Bay lies to the east, where it mostly separates Antiva from Ravane. To the north lies the Venification Sea and the island Parvalan across it. To the south lies the lands of the Free Marches, and, to round things out, the Tevinter Imperium to the west. Overall, not too bad of a place to live. As long as you don't mind the constant talk of sea weather and talk of local and international trade, you can do worse. Now, for the eastern neighbor of Antiva, the Kingdom of Ravane. Ah, Ravane. While I find Antiva to be okay in many aspects, Ravane, though, I don't know, something about it just stays with me. Almost an island, with just a tiny strip of land connecting it to Antiva, and the greater whole of Thedas, Ravane is an oddity, geographically and culturally, in equal measures. Not to get too into the cultural part here, as more in-depth view of that will come later, Ravane is notable for its lack of reverence for the Chantry and the Maker. with many Raveni preferring to revere an older faith from before the coming of the Chant of Light. Even more surprising is their view on magic, with specific leaders in communities, called seers, being able to openly practice magic. Now that I think of it, I don't know why I was ever confused over liking Ravane so much. Huh. Honestly, it just makes perfect sense when you actually put in the words. The last note before the lay of the land is the fact that the kingdom boasts a high number of converts to the Qunari belief system of the Qun. Unsurprising, given that the Qunari first made landfall in Ravane during the Steel Age, and with how enthusiastic Qunari are with spreading the Qun. We'll touch on that particular note later. But for right now, some notable features of Ravane. First and foremost is that Ravane is surrounded by bodies of water on 3 sides, with the Venification Sea to the north, the Amaranthine Ocean to the east, and Rialto Bay to the southwest. The layout of Ravane is a mix of temperate to tropical climates depending if you are on the coast or not, and valleys surrounded by many hills and mountain ranges. With the only real neighbor being Antiva to the west, Ravane is another seafaring people with a proud history of sailing, and an equally proud history of rampant piracy. Essentially an open secret, but with the nation being so open to the sea and in a prime trading location, well, the average Ravani has to make a living somehow, and farming/mountain climbing isn't for everyone. Not too much else about Ravane without going further into detail, so we will now be focusing on the last northern denizens of Thedas. The Qunari, who reside upon the island of Parvalan. This will be brief, as we know precious few facts about the culture of Parvalan, let alone the terrain, which at best can be described as heavily forested, specifically jungles and rainforests, but yeah, that's about the extent of our knowledge of the island. Many records from before the Qunari actually came to its shores are either lost or hidden by the Qunari themselves, so yeah, Parvalan, a modern mystery that is still being uncovered. Well, by us mainlanders at least. Moving on to the middle nations/regions of Thedas, we will discuss the Free Marches next. The Free Marches being a bit unique in Thedas for the fact that it is technically not a nation but a confederation of independent city-states. The area that the city-states reside in is south of Antiva and east of Navarra. The Waking Sea forms the southern border, and the Amaranthine Ocean forms the eastern border. Speaking plainly of the geography of the area, the Free Marches house some of the most fertile lands in Thedas, primarily due to the Menanta River. This massive river travels all the way from western portions of Navarra through the entirety of the Free Marches and deposits itself into the Amaranthine Ocean. This river, and more importantly the lands directly around it, are ridiculously fertile. So much so that a common saying in the Free Marches is, "off to the river." Essentially a term that means you're going to get food. The other defining feature of the Free Marches are the Vinmark Mountains that border the shores of the Waking Sea. The people of the Free Marches are difficult to explain, as each is genuinely so different depending on what city-state they originate from. A fact that each and every marcher takes immense pride in, only being dwarfed by their fierce independence. Now, we are going to shift our focus to the west of the Marches and into the Kingdom of Navarra. Navarra is bordered by the Waking Sea and Orlais to the south, the Hunterhorn Mountains and again Orlais to the west, the Tevinter Imperium to the north, and finally the Free Marches to the east, where we were just at. Navarra itself shares similar geographic qualities to Tevinter, as there are many open fertile plains that are occasionally broken up by rivers or hills. The Menanta River, as mentioned earlier, begins in Navarra, and is just as prosperous for the land around it here as it is for the Free Marches. Now, Navarra is a nice place to be for the most part, with beautiful scenery and a thriving culture. However, some aspects of the culture may turn away any prospective vacationer. Primarily their unique way of laying their dead to rest, in the fact that they, unlike everywhere else in Thedas bury their dead in sprawling underground complexes known as necropolises. This is odd, as everywhere else burns their honored dead due to the bad habit of corpses rising back to life to share the wonderful experience that is dying with the living. Since Navarra is not overrun with undead, we will assume they are making it work, but still, the mentality of death in Navarra is something that will be hard to get used to. Also, the royal family of Navarra makes the Imperial Senate seem rational and functional. Take that for what you will, as we move on. Now, the next topic of discussion shall be the Orlesian Empire that occupies vast portions of the south and portions of the central continent. The Orlesian Empire, or Orlais for short, is bordered by Ferelden and the Frostback Mountains to the east, and the Enderfells, Tevinter Imperium, and Navarra in the north and northeast respectively. The southern border of Orlais is commonly considered to be the Arbor Wilds, with anything further being uncharted frostlands. Similarly, to the west, the border is considered to be along the lines of the Erthermiel Plateau and the Tirashan Forest, with everything beyond being genuinely unknown for the most part. Now, Orlais is far too big and diverse to mention all of its unique features here, so we won't. Simple as that, really. Alright. Do not worry, as we will go over all of these unique features and climates in great detail at a later date. The only other thing to mention about Orlais is its people, and well, I'd rather not leave a sour taste in anyone's mouths with said descriptions, so to sum it up briefly, Orlesians are a very proud people with very strong opinions on many subjects. Finally, for the surface of Thedas, we are brought to the land of Ferelden, the southernmost nation of note on the continent. Ferelden is bordered by Orlais and the Frostback Mountains to the west, the Amaranthine Ocean to the east, and the Qunari Wilds to the south. The northern border is formed by the Waking Sea, separating it from the Free Marches. Ferelden is a land of diverse geography as well, from the fertile Banorn in the heartlands to the dense Brazilian forest in the central and eastern parts of the nation. The climate ranges from temperate to the north to bitterly cold and harsh to the southern regions. The country is crisscrossed by several major rivers as well, including the Drakon River and the Hafter River, which play crucial roles in trade and agriculture. The people of Ferelden are akin to the Free Marchers in that they are a diverse and fiercely independent people. Quite a few number of Fereldans do not actually consider themselves such at all. These would be the many, free tribes, which include the Avars and the Chastened, who inhabit the Frostback Mountains and Qunari Wilds respectively. The mainstay Fereldans, i.e. those who dwell within cities and farms and such, are among some of the most robust and trustworthy people you'll find on Thedas. They have a universal praise for loyalty above all else, which honestly has made them quite famous as mercenaries across the lands. There are quite a few things that make Ferelden famous, things that we will go into in their own segment. And yes, we'll go over the dogs too, as I know many of you out there are very fond of the little balls of mayhem and destruction. And that's about covers all known parts of Thedas in a relatively brief period. Almost forgot. I did make mention of an underground area of Thedas before, the Deep Roads. A sprawling network of tunnels and caverns that once connected the mighty taigs, or underground cities, of the Dwarven Empire. In their prime, the Deep Roads were a marvel of engineering, with grand highways, impressive bridges, and intricate carvings adorning the stone walls. They served as the lifeblood of the Dwarven civilization, facilitating trade, communication, and military movement between the far-flung corners of their vast realm, which, if the older sources are to be believed, extended to every part of Thedas and even outside of its borders. Curious indeed. We will go further into the Deep Roads, most likely when we discuss the dwarves themselves. Hell, it might even get its own segment, because I do have a fascination with the Deep Roads. Wonders of engineering and contain untold lost treasures and histories just waiting to be found and studied? For another time. For another time. Now, with that, we are properly done with the intro into the wonders of our world. We have only just barely scratched the surface of what Thedas has to offer, but I hope this brief overview has whetted your appetites for more. In our future discussions, we will delve deeper into each region, exploring their histories, cultures, and myriad mysteries that make our world so fascinating. And, who knows, maybe discover a few things that were lost and forgotten. Oh, and before I forget, if you have enjoyed this introduction into the world of Thedas, then I highly encourage you to submit a referral through the Board of Education here at Minrathous, or more commonly known as... like, share, and subscribe? Strangely feels archaic. Bah. But, until then, I have been your gracious lecturer, Aurelius Ferdosi, and I hope to see you all again next time. Goodbye, and until we meet again.